Medical and dental care is a pretty hot topic here in the US, especially for those who want to retire before they're 65 and before Medicare kicks in. And so today we're going to look a little closer at dental care, specifically affordable, quality, and then accessible dental care. So, first, I'd like to kind of peel back the curtain on traditional dental insurance, at least my experience in traditional dental insurance. So, I knew I would be leaving my job and had a final dental appointment, cleaning and checkup scheduled. And during that appointment, I talked to the dentist about a couple teeth that had been identified to, quote, keep an eye on. They had large fillings and kind of were starting to get a fracture or something along those lines. I don't know, I'm sure there's a dental term. And so I talked to my dentist. I said, can we go ahead and get those taken care of? I know we've been looking at them. And this is where the curtain peeled back for me, kind of like that Wizard of Oz, the grand, great, and powerful Oz was just this little guy behind a curtain. That was my insurance. So, come to find out, um, my insurance company will not pay to get those teeth who my dentist has identified as needing care until they fail. So I asked my dentist, well, what does fail mean? I get pain there occasionally, and you have x-rays to show that they're going to need these fillings are going to need to be replaced and possibly a crown put on them because they were kind of large fillings. So failing, according to my dentist, was those teeth need to fracture, break, crack off. Are you kidding? I have to wait. It's like waiting until you throw a rod in your car. You heard it knocking, it needs attention, but you can't get it taken care of. Your insurance company won't take care of it until you throw a rod and ruin the engine. And so, obviously I would have to pay for that out of pocket. And so I thought, well, I will kick that can down the road a little longer. Well, I have bumped into that can. Last week I broke one of those teeth. And as it happens, I am between dental care. And so we're going to do something a little bit crazy today. At least it sounds crazy on the surface. But, as I looked into this and have, heard other people and how they've addressed this issue, I got a lot more comfortable with it. So first, let's talk about dental care in the US, not the insurance, but the dental care. So I've been to more dentists than I would care to admit. And I found that there are different qualities of practices and cleanliness. I've been to dental practices where there are dust bunnies in the corner of the room where I'm receiving treatment. I'm a bit of a clean nut, so that was, unacceptable. And then dentists, the quality of the actual dentist. And if you think about it, there has to be someone at the top of that class, and there are people at the bottom of that class in dental school. And so just because you're in the US doesn't mean you're going to get the best dental care. So I've heard of people, actually, my husband was on a flight to India one time, and he was sitting next to a man who was traveling to India to get dental care. So apparently, this dental tourism is a pretty popular thing for probably these exact reasons. Having to pay out of pocket for what an insurance company would not cover, and then the cost of dental care here in the US. So this man was going to India. He said he could fly, take a vacation to India, get his dental work taken care of for a fraction of what it would cost here in the US. So again, this isn't too crazy, I don't think. I'll find out today. So today, we're heading south of the border. It's about a 2.5 hour drive from where we live to a town called Matamoros, where there is a cluster of dentists who service US and Canadian patients for this very reason. A little scary, but I will let you know how it goes.
Hi there, I'm Denise. I started this fully alive journey after winning a pretty tough battle with cancer. I came away with a whole new perspective and appreciation for life. Now, as I'm leaning into retirement, I'm discovering and sharing practical ways to live a fully alive life for many years to come.
So I'm back, ready to give you my firsthand account of dental care in Mexico. And, before I dive into my experience and all the nitty gritty, I thought it would be good to set a kind of a baseline for expectation. I think it was helpful for me to look at this. So the best, um, just kind of statistical baseline, not anecdotal, this is what I heard, but, to really get some stats in here, I looked at dental malpractice claims. So baseline data shows that there are about 1,500 dental claims a year. And so that's about 4 a day. And these are just claims, so it doesn't necessarily mean they went to settlement, but it also doesn't mean that there weren't issues at dental practices that did not go to a claim status. So of these 1,500 dental claims, here are some breakdowns of what that looks like. So 92% are treatment related. And so that can include things like restorations and root canals, which that's kind of what I was in for at this appointment. Nerve damage and infections are probably the most common injuries in those 1,500 a year. And then 85% cite poor technique, including a chipped tooth, gum damage, anesthesia issues, and even infections from the equipment. Now, these aren't necessarily life-threatening issues. About 82% of these claims are permanent damage, though. Whether that's a numbness in your tongue or lip, difficulty chewing, or just things that are not easily fixed. So there's our baseline. As much as we want everything to be perfect, it just isn't. And, dental care is no exception. So with this more realistic view of U.S. dental care, I'm going to look at 6 categories of my experience. I thought it'd be easiest to break it down. So that'll be travel, staff, cleanliness, equipment, the procedure, and then the cost. So here we go. So travel. For us, it was a 2.5 hour drive from where we live to the border of Mexico, with Matamoros being the town across the border. We parked in a nice little parking garage on the U.S. side and walked across the border. It was a really easy process. It was maybe a 2-minute walk to the border. And then the practice was about a 5 to 10-minute walk. A lot of these dental practices also offer a shuttle service. So if you can get across the border, there'll be a shuttle there that can pick you up and take you to and from the dental practice. So that's an option. And then a lot of people will fly into Brownsville, Texas, which is the town on the U.S. side of that border, and do the same thing, walk across the border. So travel, it does take a little bit, and I probably would not necessarily recommend this if you're just going to get your teeth cleaned. This is really more for more costly dental procedures where it might warrant the extra effort for travel. So next, the staff. So before I even scheduled this appointment, I contacted the dentist and asked him 1,000 questions. Anyway, just crafted in this email just everything that I could think of. And it did alleviate some of my concerns. He responded back and quickly and very thoroughly answered all the questions that I had. So that was great. Then when we got to the office, the staff was just super friendly. Just felt like they really wanted us to have, and I say us because my husband drove me, but wanted me to have a good experience. 2 of the doctors that I worked with, 2 of the dentists, both spoke very good English, so communication wasn't an issue. Cleanliness. All right, that's the big one for me, cleanliness. And I think I had mentioned that some of the practices in the U.S. actually had like dust bunnies in the corner, dirt. And actually, I did get really sick at one practice after I had a cleaning. So, maybe that was one of those lawsuits that didn't get filed. But the practice was very clean, no complaints, no dust bunnies. So cleanliness, check that box. I didn't have any concerns. All the instruments were in those containers. I think they call it an autoclave, that they go in and they put all their instruments in and sterilize them, and then they package them up and pull them out as they need to. So cleanliness was fine. As far as equipment, equipment probably was not cutting edge. It wasn't terrible, but my dentist in Chicago had really whiz bang equipment. They had the latest and greatest. This practice was probably closer to what my dentist in Colorado, and then a dentist here in South Texas. So still very adequate. One thing that I think where it counts, the lab that they work with. So this was one of my questions to this dentist. And they use this 3D digital imaging of your mouth to create the crown. And so they did have that. And that to me was the cutting edge that I would want, is to use a technology like that. And then the type of crown that they offer is not just, you're probably familiar with the porcelain crown, but this is called a zirconian crown. I think that's how you say it. And it is really the latest in crown technology, and it is supposed to be so much stronger than a porcelain crown and can last twice as long as a porcelain crown. So those two tech things get high marks, and to me, that's where it would count, is to have those two things in place. All right, to the procedure. Into the dental chair we go. So the dentist who was actually going to be doing this work, she sat down with me, did the kind of the exam, and did an x-ray, took a look at it. And then the main dentist, who I'd been corresponding with, came in, and they did this little kind of consult and a recommendation. And it really was kind of what I thought I would need, which was a full crown on that tooth. Really, that's the best long-term solution, especially for a tooth that has such a large filling in it. So no surprises there. It's kind of what I was expecting. So the treatment time was 2.5 hours, and that seemed long to me, but I know they were packing a lot into that appointment. Here's the big thing: no pain. You know, I hate pain. So no pain during the procedure, just a little bit of maybe tenderness on the drive home, but today, no pain whatsoever. So that's a big deal. And as far as the procedure, the biggest thing is what did not happen. So what did not happen, I did not need a root canal to where they would maybe take too much of the filling out and get to the root. So no root canal. And then the other big thing that did not happen is, as they were removing the filling, the tooth did not fracture further or get to a state where I would actually lose the entire tooth. Those are the two big concerns I had. So, getting on the other side of that felt so good. All right, here's the final drum roll. So the cost of a zirconian crown with this kind of digital imaging that they did, trying to find a cost in the US was a little challenging. Just, without actually going into the dentist and then doing the x-ray, the exam, and actually it could have to advance to a place where they're actually, taking the old filling out and putting the crown in before we really know what the bottom line is. So what I did was I kind of pieced together the pieces of what I had in Mexico. And so that included the exam or the consult with your dentist, the x-ray, the doing the buildup, which is billed separately, so having to do that buildup, then the lab work for the zirconian crown to be produced, and the digital imaging and all of that, and then the temporary crown, and then the final crown placement. And so all of that in the US would cost around $2,000. Estimates that I could see were about $1,800 to $2,500 for a single tooth with that zirconian crown with the buildup and all the appointments that go with that. So that was a significant dollar amount. So what I paid for in Mexico, and this was one of the questions I had asked, was how much would it cost? And the doctor was very transparent. He quoted me what the crown would cost and then what a buildup would cost if that was needed. And he thought it would probably most likely be needed since there was a large filling in the tooth. And so what he quoted me was $480 for the crown and then $190 for the buildup. They did not charge for an office consult. They did not charge separately for the x-ray or for the lab work or the temporary crown. It was just kind of all packaged into this crown price. Total, as I walked out of there, it was $670. That's a savings of about $1,300 or 66% less than what that could cost me here in South Texas. Would I do this again? And the answer is probably yes, especially given the kind of circumstances that I am dealing with here with an insurance company that will not pay for a preventative kind of treatment for a tooth that the dentist is watching until it breaks. I would much rather pay ahead of time, know what I'm dealing with, get that crown placed before the tooth breaks, and perhaps risk losing the tooth altogether. So that would be a definite yes. I would go and have that done rather than paying out of pocket because my insurance company doesn't cover it to have that done here in the US. Or if you're between insurance companies, that's a good option too for some of this more major dental work. But just for a dental cleaning or checkup, I would probably just pay out of pocket to have that done here locally. So now I'm curious if you've ever had dental care outside of the US. Some of these dental tourism places. I know Cancun's a big one. There's a place across from Yuma, Arizona in Mexico. I've heard Thailand and even Turkey, Fethiye, Turkey, and then even India. So if you've experienced any of that, I would love to hear what your experience was and whether you could recommend having dental work done in one of those locations. So thanks for coming along on my little dental adventure. I hope my experience has maybe given you some insights to what dental tourism is and what it could look like for you. Or if you're just curious about the cost of what dental care costs outside of the United States. So until next time, here's to living our lives fully alive and finding all the adventures along the way.